In the quiet town of Rosewood, Sarah's home was a labyrinth of memories turned nightmares. The walls, once vibrant with the echoes of laughter, now stood silent witnesses to a life unraveling. At 10 years old, Sarah's brown eyes bore the weight of an existence marred by sorrow. Her father, Michael, once a beacon of joy, now lay slumped on a threadbare sofa, lost to the comforting embrace of alcohol. Beside him, Linda, his harsh and imposing girlfriend, cast shadows that darkened the very air they breathed. "Keep quiet, Sarah. It's none of your concern," Linda snarled, her words as venomous as her glances. Sarah, her heart heavy with the routine of despair, retreated inward, clinging to the remnants of a once warm and loving household. The morning light struggled to pierce the gloom that pervaded their small home. It was a day like any other, filled with the sharp sting of words and the bitter taste of neglect. But for Sarah, something had shifted. A slap, fierce and sudden, marked more than just her cheek. It ignited a spark of resolve deep within her, a determination to escape the shadows that had long engulfed her. As the house settled into the uneasy quiet of sleep, Sarah packed a small blue backpack with a few treasures: a faded fairy tale book, a cherished photograph, and a well-worn teddy bear. Each item was a silent testament to the hope she clung to despite the darkness that surrounded her. With the first light of dawn, Sarah slipped out, the gravel path cool beneath her bare feet. She did not look back. Every step was a farewell to fear, a step towards an uncertain but hopeful future. The world lay silent and unaware, as a young girl, armed only with her courage, set out to find the light she had long been denied. And you, dear reader, would you have the same courage as Sarah? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Laurie's journey began in the dimly lit corridors of her home, a place once filled with laughter and warmth, but now echoing only with the harshness of her father's anger and the cruelty of his girlfriend, Brenda. Each morning, Laurie awoke to the sounds of arguments, her father's slurred words, and Brenda's sharp retorts. The love that once bound her family had dissolved into a bitter fog of resentment and neglect. In the soft light of dawn, Laurie would tiptoe down the hall, her heart heavy with the weight of her reality. She moved quietly, careful not to wake her father, whose temper had grown unpredictable and dangerous under the influence of alcohol. Brenda, always vigilant, would catch Laurie's eye with a glare that seemed to cut through the darkness. "Shut up, Laurie. It's none of your business," Brenda would snap, her words dripping with venom whenever Laurie dared to ask for something as simple as breakfast. Robert, once a pillar of strength and kindness, now seemed like a ghost of his former self, slouched on the old, worn-out sofa, a bottle permanently clutched in his trembling hand. The man who used to tell Laurie bedtime stories and tuck her in with a kiss was gone, replaced by a shadow who barely noticed her presence. Laurie's life was a constant struggle to maintain some semblance of normalcy, to hold on to the memories of better times. Each day, she hoped for a miracle, for some sign that things would change, but every morning brought the same bleak reality. One particularly harsh morning, the tension in the house reached a breaking point. Brenda's anger erupted into violence, her hand striking Laurie's cheek with a force that left a vivid red mark and a deeper wound in Laurie's heart. It was in that moment, with the sting of the slap still fresh on her skin, that Laurie knew she had to leave. The walls of her home had become a prison, and she needed to escape before they closed in completely. As the sun began to rise, casting a faint glow through the tattered curtains, Laurie gathered her courage. She packed a small blue backpack with her most precious possessions: a fairy tale book that had once belonged to her mother, a faded photo of happier times, and her beloved stuffed teddy bear. These were the only remnants of the life she longed to reclaim. With each step towards the door, Laurie's heart beat faster. She moved silently, the fear of waking her father and Brenda urging her to be as quiet as a whisper. The old door creaked as she opened it, but she didn't look back. Not when the door clicked shut behind her. Not when her feet met the cold gravel path outside. Laurie's journey had begun. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew that anywhere was better than the place she had left behind. The sunrise, with its promise of a new beginning, guided her steps as she ventured into the unknown, carrying the fragile glow of hope within her heart. As the sun rose higher, Laurie's legs carried her further from the only home she had known. Her heart pounded with fear and uncertainty, but a sliver of hope pushed her forward. She clutched a small blue backpack tightly, feeling the weight of her meager possessions: a fairy tale book, a faded photograph, and a worn-out teddy bear. These items were her anchors, reminders of a happier past that felt like a distant dream. With each step, the cool morning air filled her lungs, bringing a sense of renewal and courage. The streets of Savannah, usually bustling, were still quiet, offering a rare moment of peace. Laurie walked with purpose, her eyes scanning for a place to rest, a place where she could be invisible, if only for a while. Her feet led her to an abandoned house at the end of a narrow street. The house, with its broken windows and overgrown yard, seemed to call to her, offering a sanctuary from the chaos she had left behind. Laurie hesitated at the gate, her small hand trembling as she pushed it open. The creak of the hinges was loud in the stillness, but she pressed on, determined. Inside, the house was filled with remnants of a life once lived. Dusty furniture, faded photographs, and forgotten trinkets were scattered about, telling stories of a time long past. Laurie moved cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. She found a corner in the living room, behind an old sofa, and settled down. The cushions were musty, but to Laurie, they felt like the softest bed. As she sat there, her mind raced with thoughts of her father and Brenda, wondering if they had noticed her absence. She knew she had to be careful, to stay hidden until she could figure out her next move. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of respite, her eyes growing heavy with exhaustion. In the silence of the abandoned house, Laurie felt a sense of safety she had not known in a long time. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent promise to herself: "I will survive. I will find a way." And with that, she drifted into a dreamless sleep, the first peaceful rest she had had in years. In the dim light of that fateful morning, tension crackled like static in the air. Robert and Brenda's argument escalated, each word a sharp blade cutting deeper. Laurie, small and silent in her corner, watched as the storm brewed, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, it happened. A loud slap reverberated through the room, the sound piercing the silence like a gunshot. Laurie's cheek stung with the force of Brenda's hand, and the room seemed to freeze around her. The physical pain was nothing compared to the surge of resolve that welled up within her. This was the final straw. She waited until the snoring of her father and the grumbling of Brenda filled the house, then moved with the stealth of a hunted animal. Her small hands trembled, not with fear, but with urgency, as she grabbed her blue backpack. The bag was filled with her most precious treasures: a fairy tale book that had once belonged to her mother, a faded photo of happier times, and a stuffed teddy bear that had been her silent confidant during the long, lonely nights. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, promising a new beginning, Laurie slipped out of the house. The door closed with a final click, and she did not look back. Her small feet met the cool gravel path, each step taking her further from the house that had never been a home since Brenda's arrival. Every breath was a silent farewell to the pain and fear. Laurie didn't know where she was going, but she knew that anywhere was better than where she had been. While the city slept, a 10-year-old girl carried on her shoulders the courage that many adults never find. In her heart, the fragile glow of hope burned bright. Would you have the same courage as Laurie? Leave your thoughts in the comments. As the argument between her father and Brenda escalated, Laurie huddled in the corner, her small frame trembling with fear. The sound of a slap broke the air, a sharp, painful noise that reverberated through Laurie's very soul. Brenda's handprint bloomed red on Laurie's cheek, a symbol of the abuse that had become her daily reality. But something inside Laurie stirred at that moment. A resolve that had been growing quietly now roared to life. She knew she had to escape. She waited, her heart pounding, until the house finally quieted with the heavy snores of her father and Brenda. With trembling hands, Laurie grabbed her small blue backpack. It held her most precious treasures, a fairy tale book that had belonged to her mother, a faded photo of happier times, and a stuffed teddy bear that had been her silent confidant. She slipped out of the house, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. The dawn was breaking, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Each step Laurie took on the gravel path was a step away from fear and towards a fragile hope. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew anywhere was better than the place she was leaving behind. Her small feet carried her through the quiet streets of Savannah, the city still asleep. The cold morning air nipped at her, but she pressed on, driven by the promise of a new beginning. She didn't look back, not even when the house that had never been a home faded into the distance. With each breath, she silently bid farewell to the pain and fear that had been her constant companions. Laurie, just 10 years old, walked with the courage of a warrior. She carried within her the hope of a better life, a life free from the chains of abuse and neglect. And in her heart, she held on to the dream of finding a place where she could finally belong. Laurie found herself enveloped by the warmth and safety of George and Martha's home. The soft ticking of an old clock and the comforting hum of Martha's voice as she worked in the kitchen became the background music to her new life. Every morning began with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the soft clatter of breakfast preparations, creating a symphony of normalcy that Laurie had longed for. George and Martha were gentle and kind, their actions speaking louder than words. George would often take Laurie to his workshop, teaching her the art of woodworking. "These hands," he would say, showing her his calloused palms, "have built many things, but nothing more important than the life we live." Laurie cherished these moments, feeling the weight of each tool and the care in every instruction. Martha, on the other hand, introduced Laurie to the beauty of the garden. Together, they planted seeds and watched them grow, a silent metaphor for Laurie's own life. "Every plant has its season," Martha would remind her, "and every storm passes, leaving the soil richer for the experience." In this new environment, Laurie began to rediscover herself. She explored the small town, feeling the cobblestones under her feet as she walked to the local library. The librarians knew her by name, and the vast world of books became her refuge. Each story she read was a step away from her past, and a glimpse into a future full of possibilities. Despite the tranquility, Laurie couldn't help but feel the lingering shadows of her past. At night, she would lie in bed, listening to the soft creaks of the house, and wonder about her father. The fear of him finding her was a ghost that haunted her dreams. But with George and Martha's unwavering support, Laurie slowly began to believe in the strength of her new family. Their love and care wrapped around her like a protective cocoon, allowing Laurie to heal and grow. The girl who once crept down hallways in fear was now learning to stand tall, her spirit nourished by the gentle hands that had taken her in. In the light of each new day, Laurie saw the promise of a life she had never dared to dream of, a life where she was safe, loved, and free to be herself. Years later, Laurie was walking through the bustling streets of the city, now confident and poised. The memories of her past were far behind her, or so she thought. As she turned a corner, her eyes met a familiar figure, a man with a worn face and haunted eyes, shuffling along the pavement. It was Robert, her father. The man who had once been a ghost of sorrow in her life was now a mere shadow of his former self. Laurie froze, her heart pounding with a mix of emotions. She watched as Robert, oblivious to her presence, continued on his path, his steps heavy with the weight of his regrets. In that moment, the years of anger and hurt seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of pity and sorrow. Without thinking, Laurie found herself approaching him. "Dad!" she called softly. Robert stopped, his body stiffening at the sound of the familiar voice. Slowly, he turned, his eyes widening in disbelief as they met his daughter's gaze. "Laurie," he croaked, his voice trembling. He looked her up and down, taking in the sight of the successful, strong woman she had become. "Is it really you?" "It's me," Laurie replied, her voice gentle yet firm. "I've come a long way, Dad. I've built a life for myself, thanks to George and Martha. They took me in, gave me the love and support I needed." Robert's eyes filled with tears, and he sank to his knees. "I'm so sorry, Laurie. I've lived with the regret of what I did every single day. I was a terrible father, and I don't deserve your forgiveness." Laurie knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We can't change the past, but we can try to make amends. It's never too late to start over." In that moment, surrounded by the noise and chaos of the city, Laurie and Robert began to bridge the gap that had separated them for so long. It was a small step, but it was a step towards healing, towards understanding, and towards a future that held the promise of reconciliation and redemption. Life with George and Martha was a sanctuary Laurie had never known. Each day, filled with small but profound moments of joy, began to heal the wounds of her past. George, with his steady hands and patient heart, taught Laurie the art of woodworking, transforming rough pieces of timber into delicate creations. Martha, with her endless warmth, introduced Laurie to the wonders of gardening, showing her how to coax life from the soil. In the mornings, the aroma of freshly baked bread and the gentle hum of the radio filled the house. Martha and Laurie would share stories over breakfast, their bond deepening with each passing day. George would join them, his laughter a soothing balm to Laurie's soul. The home, once filled with the silence of an empty nest, now echoed with the sounds of newfound family. Despite the happiness she found, a shadow of her past lingered in Laurie's heart. At night, when the house settled into a quiet slumber, Laurie would sometimes wake from dreams of her father's drunken rages and Brenda's cruel words. George and Martha sensed the lingering fear and never pushed her to share more than she was ready to. "Take your time, dear," Martha would say, her voice a gentle promise of unconditional support. "We're here for you, always." With every act of kindness and every shared moment, Laurie's trust in them grew. She began to open up, revealing bits of her past, the hardships she endured, and the courage it took to run away. George and Martha listened with heavy hearts, their love for Laurie only growing stronger. The garden became Laurie's sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the rhythm of nature. As she tended to the roses and herbs, she found solace in their silent resilience. George's workshop was her haven, a place where she could channel her emotions into creating something beautiful. One afternoon, as Laurie sat with George in the workshop, she looked at him with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, George," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." George, with his ever-gentle smile, replied, "You've given us more than you know, Laurie. You've brought light back into our lives." As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Laurie's heart began to heal. She started to believe that she was not just a survivor, but also a beloved daughter in a family that cherished her. The love and acceptance she found with George and Martha became the foundation upon which she built her new life, a life filled with hope, promise, and the unshakable belief that she was finally home. Laurie had grown into an exceptional young woman, her legal career flourishing as she worked tirelessly to help those in need. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a hesitant figure crossed the front door of her law firm. The woman, with marks of a hard life etched on her face and traces of fear in her eyes, seemed out of place in the polished and professional setting. Laurie rose from her desk, her curiosity piqued by the visitor's hesitation. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I need help," the woman whispered, her voice fragile. "My partner. He's not a good man." As the woman spoke, Laurie felt a flash of recognition. The features, despite being worn down by time and suffering, were unmistakably familiar. "Mom," Laurie whispered, almost unable to believe it. The woman looked up, meeting Laurie's eyes. In an instant, years of separation and pain dissolved. "Laurie, my little Laurie," the woman said, her voice breaking with emotion. It was, and Laurie's biological mother. The last time Laurie had seen her, she was just a child. Now, she stood before her mother as a grown woman, a successful attorney. Laurie approached, taking her mother's trembling hands in hers. "I'll help you, Mom," Laurie promised, her voice filled with determination. "I'll make sure you're safe." She worked tirelessly on the case, offering not only her legal expertise but also her compassion and understanding. With each petition and every hearing, Laurie reaffirmed her commitment to justice and began to mend the fractured relationship with her mother. When they finally secured a restraining order against Anne's abusive partner and began the process of bringing her to a safe place, Laurie knew she had done more than her duty as a lawyer. She had initiated the healing process, both for her mother and for herself. As Anne looked at her daughter, now her savior, she realized that Laurie had indeed become Dr. Laurie Taylor, a woman of immense strength and generosity. In the midst of the storm, they found a path to reconciliation, guided by love and the determination to build a better future together. The day of Laurie's graduation dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the tumultuous journey that had brought her to this moment. The auditorium was filled with the hum of proud families and the excited chatter of fellow graduates. Among them, Laurie stood out, not just for her academic achievements, but for the quiet strength and resilience that radiated from her. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, her eyes searched the crowd, finding George and Martha beaming with pride. Their support had been unwavering, their love a constant anchor through the storms of her past. She smiled at them, a silent promise that their belief in her had been justified. After the ceremony, Laurie joined her adoptive parents in a tight embrace. "We always knew you could do it," George said, his voice thick with emotion. Martha nodded, wiping away tears of joy. "You've made us so proud, Laurie." But amidst the celebration, Laurie's thoughts turned to her biological mother, Anne. She had come so far in her recovery, and Laurie had worked tirelessly to ensure her safety and well-being. Today, Anne was supposed to join them, a symbol of their reconciliation and the new life they were building together. Just as Laurie began to worry, she saw Anne approaching. Her mother's face was a mix of pride and gratitude, her steps more confident than Laurie had ever seen. "You did it," Anne whispered as she hugged Laurie tightly. "I'm so proud of you." Laurie pulled back, looking into her mother's eyes. "We did it, Mom. We've come a long way together." That evening, they celebrated at a small, intimate dinner with George, Martha, and Anne. Laughter filled the room, and for the first time, Laurie felt the true warmth of a united family. They shared stories, toasted to new beginnings, and made plans for a future that now seemed filled with endless possibilities. As the night drew to a close, Laurie sat with George on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around them. "Life is a journey," George said softly, "and you've shown us all what it means to walk that path with courage and grace." Laurie leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by the lightness of hope and love. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," she replied. "You gave me a home when I had none, and a family when I thought I was alone." The stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to Laurie's journey from a scared little girl to a strong, determined woman. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who loved her, Laurie knew she had truly found her place in the world. Years had passed since Laurie, with the support of George and Martha, had earned her law degree and established a renowned law firm in Atlanta. Known as Dr. Laurie Taylor, she was celebrated not only for her legal acumen but also for her empathy and compassion, qualities that set her apart in a competitive field. Her journey had been one of resilience, but it was far from over. One rainy afternoon, as the steady rhythm of raindrops painted patterns on her office window, a hesitant figure crossed the front door. Laurie, rising from her desk, was taken aback by the sight of the woman standing before her. Despite the wear of time and hardship etched on her face, the features were unmistakably familiar. "Mom," Laurie whispered, almost disbelieving. The woman, looking up with a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes, was indeed Laurie's biological mother. The last time Laurie had seen her, she was a frightened child. Now, as a grown woman and a successful attorney, she stood ready to bridge the chasm of years that separated them. "Laurie, my little Laurie," Anne's voice trembled, filled with both regret and yearning. Laurie approached, taking her mother's trembling hands in her own. The room seemed to hold its breath as Laurie spoke, her voice a blend of firmness and tenderness. "I will help you, Mom. I'll make sure you're safe." Laurie poured her heart and soul into the case, using not just her legal expertise but also the depth of her compassion. Each petition filed and every hearing attended was more than a professional duty. It was a step toward healing the wounds of the past. Through her efforts, she secured a restraining order against Anne's abusive partner and began the process of finding her a safe place to live. As Anne looked at Laurie, now not just her daughter but her savior, she saw the strength and generosity that had grown in the woman who stood before her. Laurie, having achieved what many would deem impossible, understood that this victory was more profound than any legal triumph. It was a personal reconciliation, a reunion that mended the fractures of their shared past. In the glow of this new beginning, Laurie and Anne began to rebuild their relationship, piece by piece. The office, once a symbol of Laurie's professional achievements, now bore witness to the most significant success of all, the reclamation of a bond thought lost to time and circumstance. As Laurie delved deeper into her mother's case, the threads of their past began to weave a tapestry of understanding and forgiveness. Laurie had transformed from the scared little girl into a fierce advocate for justice, and now she faced her most personal case yet. Anne, who had once abandoned Laurie in a desperate attempt to escape her own demons, was now relying on her daughter's strength to guide her through the legal battle. In the courtroom, Laurie stood tall, her voice steady and powerful as she presented her case. "Your Honor, my client has endured unimaginable hardships. She was trapped in an abusive relationship, stripped of her dignity and her rights. Today, we seek not just justice but a chance for her to rebuild her life, free from the shadows of her past." And sat behind her, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of shame and hope. She marveled at the woman Laurie had become, strong, compassionate, and unyielding. Laurie's words echoed through the courtroom, resonating with everyone present. As the judge deliberated, Laurie turned to and took her hand. "No matter what happens, we're in this together. You gave me life, and now it's my turn to help you reclaim yours." The judge's decision came swiftly, a restraining order against Anne's abusive partner and a clear path to her rehabilitation. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Laurie's focus remained on her mother. "This is just the beginning, Mom. We'll get through this, one step at a time." Back at the Taylor's home, the family celebrated the victory. George and Martha embraced Anne, welcoming her into their family with open arms. The once strangers were now bound by a shared love for Laurie and a collective commitment to healing. In the quiet moments after the celebration, Anne and Laurie sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. "I never thought I'd see the day when I could feel safe again," Anne whispered. Laurie smiled, her heart full. "It's never too late to find peace, Mom. We'll face the future together, stronger than ever." As the night enveloped them in its gentle embrace, Laurie felt a profound sense of closure. She had bridged the gap between her past and her present, and in doing so, had forged an unbreakable bond with her mother. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but now they were finally free to build a new life, grounded in love and mutual respect. Under the soft glow of the setting sun, Laurie stood at the threshold of the house she once sought refuge in. It had been years since she first found solace within its walls, and now, standing alongside George, Martha, and Anne, it felt like the closing of a circle. The house had weathered much, but it still stood strong, much like Laurie herself. Laurie turned to George and Martha, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You both saved me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You gave me a home when I had none, love when I felt unlovable. I can never thank you enough." George, his eyes moist with unshed tears, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've given us more than we ever gave you, Laurie. You've filled our lives with joy and purpose. We're so proud of the woman you've become." And standing nearby, took a deep breath and stepped forward. "And you've given me a second chance," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I lost myself for so long, but seeing the strength and kindness in you, I found my way back." Laurie hugged her mother tightly, feeling the warmth and love in the embrace. "We're a family now," she whispered, "bound not just by blood, but by the love and resilience we've shared." As they stood there, united, the world seemed to hold its breath. The future was a vast, open field, and they were ready to step into it together. Laurie felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had found her place, her purpose, and her people. They decided to renovate the old house, turning it into a sanctuary for other children in need, a place where they could find safety, love, and the promise of a better future. It would be a beacon of hope, just as it had been for Laurie. With every brick laid and every wall painted, they poured their love and care into the house, transforming it into a symbol of new beginnings. And as they worked together, laughter and joy filled the air, erasing the shadows of the past. The first night in the newly renovated house was magical. They gathered around a table, sharing a meal filled with warmth and laughter. The walls, once silent witnesses to Laurie's solitary nights, now echoed with the sounds of family and love. Looking around the table, Laurie felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She had turned her pain into purpose, her struggles into strength. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led her to this moment of unspoken beauty and peace. As they toasted to new beginnings, Laurie knew that the past was just a chapter in their story. The future, bright and full of promise, awaited them, and together, they would face it with unwavering courage and boundless love. In that moment, Laurie realized that life, with all its twists and turns, had brought her exactly where she needed to be. Surrounded by her family, bound by love, she had finally found her home.